Skittles.
Skittles. He eats Skittles, and we talk about football.
Not the green apple ones.
It is the Audible live Thursday night. Make us part of your two-screen experience. Drink some straight mixer if you'd like. Make us part of your two-screen experience and watch the football game with us while we talk about the news and notes from across the National Football League and go over the injury reports as well. But first, Bloom, I can't jump into the injuries until I hear you sing tonight.
Ah, yes, and then came the hurly girly man singing songs of love 3 times. I'm not going to sing it 3 times, but I'm not going to get to sing it on the recap show, so I have to sing it now. Who would have thought that we're going to see an NFC West shootout? I don't know. It got started with a miscue, a Brian Hoyer interception, surprise, surprise, and Todd Gurley finished. But I think we've seen surprisingly good quarterback play from Jared Goff, or at least if this is the first time you've checked in, if you didn't get to watch the first 2 games. And this is what we were looking forward to, was a national audience for Jared Goff with Sean McVay to really see how this offense is coming together. Brian Hoyer starting off on a low note, doing a typical Brian Hoyer performance. Like, this is like Brian Hoyer's career. Enough plays to make you think, well, he's not the worst quarterback. He maybe can be a viable low-end starting quarterback. And then he reminds you why he should be a backup quarterback. But because there aren't 32 starting quality quarterbacks, we get to watch him start football games almost every year now.
And Matt, I'm glad you're wearing your Georgia hat and not one of these color rush uniforms, which are awful.
Yeah, well, I don't really worry about fashion statements with football, but I hear you. I do worry about that they have these Thursday night games where the choices are, a little left to be desired, but this is a good game, and it's nice to see Jared Goff comfortable. And you can tell that with his footwork. He's sticking the drops and setting up very quickly, very aggressively. Not too many hinge steps. Usually just one, and it's gone. And even when it's a little underthrown, he's spotting the open man, and he may be backing up a little bit still from the rush. He didn't do that at Cal. He actually stepped up more, but that's part of the comfort level that you have to gain. And I think that when you look at the pressure that was coming into the pocket late in the half, he was doing a really nice job of standing in there and finding the open man, hitting Cooper Kupp, who made a really nice move and, proved once again that the first 15 yards is way more important than the last 20 when it comes to speed and quickness. And then also a really nice play to Sammy Watkins earlier to keep the drive alive. So it's fun to see. The offensive line looks good. And even Gurley looked pretty decent in pass pro as well. So that was nice. From the standpoint of helping out, having a balanced Rams offense. And, the 49ers aren't great, but it's a good start.
Well, Matt, and then I go back, and not just this game, but just when you go through the fantasy wide receivers, and I'm going back and I'm like, oh my God, we saw a really great collection at the Senior Bowl this year of wide receivers. Trent Taylor's out there making plays. We talk about Zay Jones on this show, of course, Cooper Kupp out there, Ryan Switzer, we were treated, Taywan Taylor, we were treated to a pretty damn good group in Mobile.
Yeah, absolutely we were. And, to me, Cooper Kupp, I've said this before on the show, but since we've been going to the Senior Bowl together and watching the one-on-ones that they do with press coverage drills, I've never seen a receiver dominate that press coverage drill against multiple defenders using multiple different moves other than Cooper Kupp. You take that layer, you take Steve Smith at the combine having to interrupt somebody else's commentary and say, that guy's my guy. He's my top receiver in this draft. And Steve Smith says that, hey, listen, I'm listening. Even if I don't fully agree, I will. But, other people, if you don't, you got to listen to Steve Smith or he might tell you to ice up.
Ice up, son. Ice up, Dr. Gene, because we're going to go to you for about 25 minutes or so talking about injuries across the National Football League. And first and foremost, of course, everyone's wondering what to expect from Odell Beckham Jr. this week. What did you see from him this last week, and should we see progress going forward?
Yeah, I think there's going to be progress. He got through the last game on on Monday night without any setbacks, which I really think was the most important deal. We weren't sure whether or not they were going to ask him to run routes that he couldn't win on, call them decoys if you want, but there are certain routes that, you hope a wide receiver is going to be able to run injured and just isn't be able to. We didn't see him out there doing that, but when he was out there, he seemed like he was okay accelerating in a straight line, but he didn't have much lateral movement, and hopefully that will be better this week. He's gone through another week of limited practice, should be closer to full recovery. I don't think he's going to be there yet, but I think we're going to see more than 25 to 30 snaps from him, and hopefully those routes are more successful than they were on Monday night.
Gene, so many injuries. I don't know which one to pick. Terrence West, calf injury, and it seems like calf injuries can be especially tricky. We also have the extra added variable of this game being in London, and of course we are all excited, especially Clayton Gray, to potentially see Alex Collins get a lot of work for the Ravens. What do we think about Terrence West missing first 2 practices across the pond?
Happy birthday,
boy,
Carlton, by the way. No doubt.
Yeah.
Happy birthday. Go Hogs. I think if West plays, and I think it's clearly to the doubtful side of questionable at this point, despite what the Ravens said at the end of the game, that it was just sort of resting him for precautionary reasons. He's not practiced yet. They've got a long travel ahead. I think it's possible that he doesn't travel or that he's listed inactive pretty early on tomorrow. But if he does play, I think he's going to be limited at best, and we're going to see as much Collins as we do West, and with Buck Allen working in, certainly on passing downs and probably a little bit more often than that.
Gene, tell us a little bit about Fat Rob Kelly and Chris Thompson. Both of them are dealing with injuries. Which one do you think is most likely to play?
Thompson's been fully practicing. The back injury, it's always something that we want to watch to make sure that something doesn't crop up and get aggravated somewhat unexpectedly. But he's been fully practicing, and I expect him to go. I think Rob Kelly's going to play too. However, how limited he'll be remains to be seen. It's going to be a pain tolerance issue, and not that a rib cartilage injury is any fun to go through for a football player, much less a running back. But it is easier to deal with, probably easier to recover from a pain tolerance standpoint than a rib fracture itself. So Thompson's going to play. We'll see where Kelly is, but I don't know that we'll see a full practice from Kelly on Friday, but I would expect him to be available on this weekend.
It is the Audible Live of Footballguys.com. And as Bloom mentioned, Dr. Gene, so many injuries to go through, and guys that are coming back from injury, including one that I'm watching practice for 2 weeks in a row now. Advanced Joseph won't answer me when I straight up ask him, like, how much Booker are we going to see if he plays? Dr. Gene, will you answer me? Like, shouldn't he be back by now? Like week 3? Week 2, week 3 was always what I heard initially. He's practiced for 2 weeks now, and yet still no confirmation he'll be back.
Yeah, I don't think he's on the injury report this week, is he? I don't think I saw him. I don't think that he's listed. So there's pretty much no concern at this point, I would think. He said he was pain-free a couple of weeks ago. They went ahead and did that CAT scan and cleared him to return to practice. And I think that's a good sign. How much is he going to play, I think depends on how well C.J. Anderson is playing, and he's looked pretty good, at least last week for sure, and week 1 as well. And Jamal Charles has been able to take a little bit more of the load than maybe folks expected. So there's not a lot of room for Booker at this point, but I think they'd like to see him active. It may come down, Cease, to how much he's able to contribute on special teams, because we know Jamal Charles and CJ are not going to be asked to do that. So if Booker can be effective on special teams, then I think we'll see him active. If not, he may be a healthy scratch until they decide that he's fully healthy and ready to go.
Gene, how wary should we be of playing our Minnesota Vikings this week with Sam Bradford looking like he's going to be back, practicing in limited fashion? And on a scale from, we'll look back and laugh about this, missing that week, it was just a little blip, to this is going to be something that is a problem all year, and really a sign that when Sam Bradford was close to retirement, and there was a couple of years ago that we were all basically writing Bradford off. And are we all just catching up as the elastic snapping back? So we're getting there. So there's your ends of the spectrum. We're just going to laugh about this when the season's over, to, it's all coming, the bell's tolling for Sam Bradford.
Could you get me a little wider range of expectations there?
Yeah.
It's got to be somewhere in between. I don't think I've seen, what are we supposed to take away from Bradford doing, a couple of dropbacks from what it looked like 40 yards away on some of these videos? But he does look like he's willing to bounce up and down on those legs a little bit, whereas he didn't really want anything moving away from the ground on Sunday during pregame warmup. So I have not seen enough from him yet that makes me think he's definitely going to play. I don't think that they put a limited Sam Bradford in the pocket at all. There's no reason to do it because he's at risk of having other issues or coming back to the locker room in the training room on Monday with the setback of sorts. So I think he needs to do a little bit more on Friday for them to be able to play him. But I don't think this is going to be a longer term issue. I don't think he would have been on the field doing anything in practice. He'd have been getting treatment. They would have put him out there, would not have put him out there where he's at risk of having any funny steps at all if they had some level of concern. So I think it's partly pain tolerance, partly swelling and stiffness issues that he has going on. And hopefully he shows enough on Friday to make us feel comfortable. Right now, I think he's a little bit more doubtful than questionable, but willing to see more from him in practice on Friday and expect him to play.
Gene, I have a request and then a question. The first request is Mike Sullivan, the center for the Rams, just got hurt, and he was on the training table. It looked like either a foot or ankle, and so that could be a big blow for the Rams, either short or long term. Even though Goff just hit a deep route, it looks like to Sammy Watkins one-on-one, which is made a really nice move inside out and stacked the defender well with a beautiful catch. But the next thing is what about Jordan Howard and his shoulder? You always talk about how shoulders and running backs, bad combo when you talk about injuries. What's that outlook look like for the Chicago Bear?
Well, it looks better than I thought it was going to look on Sunday. He left the locker room after the game, after a really lackluster game in a sling on Sunday, and then came back and talked to reporters on Monday without the sling and was fairly positive about his injury. And that doesn't mean that he's going to be able to stand up to the pounding of running the football and pass protecting this weekend. But he's been through another week of limited practice. There's not been any indication from the team that he's not going to be able to play. It remains to be seen how limited he's going to be. And again, you've got Terry Cohen there playing very well. So they may not need as much Jordan Howard as they'd like. So I think we're going to have a very good sense after this week whether or not he's going to struggle over another couple of weeks into the future. But hopefully we see a little bit healthier Howard this week than we did last.
Dr. Gene, what's up with Jay Ajayi, and how confident should fantasy owners be?
Adam Gase doesn't seem to be worried about it at all. Last week we went through this where Ajayi was listed on the practice report, but he fully practiced all week. This week we're Wednesday and Thursday DNPs for him where he's not going. And there doesn't seem to be any concern around the team, but we know that Ajayi has knee issues, and that's what caused him to drop in the draft a little bit. So whether it's related to that or whether this is just the way that Miami is going to handle their veteran rest with Ajayi over the first month or so of the season remains to be seen. But there was not any concern from the team on Thursday and in their press conferences that either he or Devontae Parker was not going to be able to play. So I think we work under the expectation that even though neither one of them are practicing on Thursday, that they are going to be expected to play and take pretty close to their usual workload, if not their full workload. Ajayi had 28 touches last week until something's proven otherwise. Really would be nice to see them practice in some sort of capacity on Friday, but media availability and some of the media reports that we get through the weekend are really going to tell the tale. For now, haven't seen anything that has me concerned in the short term. Long term, we went from full practice to not practicing at all this week. Hopefully it's just because they wanted him to get rest after that big workload he had, but we'll see as we go.
Well, let's stay with the same team, Gene. Devontae Parker going from a limited Wednesday practice to a missed practice on Thursday with an ankle. I thought we were going to, well, and it's not a soft tissue injury because, the muscle pulls and things like that. He was doing work in the offseason, so we wouldn't end up back here, but we kind of are back here. If he is active, it's always the two-pronged question. What's your outlook on whether he'll be active? And if he is active, should we be wary of playing him?
I think if he's active, we probably ought to be okay unless we hear something otherwise. Both Ajayi and Parker were said to be precautionary absences today, so I'm not expecting anything other than that. Friday practice is going to be important. I'd like him to talk to the media. We'd like not to hear anything from Adam Schefter and Ian Rappaport on Sunday. But with him, Parker doing a little bit on Wednesday, and there not seeming to be much concern, it just sounds like they took both Ajayi and Parker took a couple of big hits that Adam Gase wanted to get him a little bit of rest. And I hope that's going to be the case.
Isn't that nice they let that young man on the sidelines? Oh, wait, that's Sean McVay.
What's he doing all the way down inside the 5?
That's got to be 4. That looked like 4. Get him 4 here anyway. His
arm was down.
Tell me about Jordy Nelson and tell me something good.
Jordy Nelson's going to play. How about that? Full practice. Looks like it's just no more than a contusion. They were able to manage some of the swelling and whatever bleeding he had in the muscle with that Charlie horse, the muscle contusion. I think the bigger concern is Randall Cobb, who hasn't practiced yet, who said he was in all kinds of pain on Wednesday, didn't go again on Thursday. It's looking like he's not going to be able to play. There's always room for a Friday practice surprise with him where he gets on the field and they see how he responds on Saturday and maybe he's in a limited role. But there's not a lot to like with Randall Cobb's practice participation after what seemed like a relatively reassuring MRI report on Monday. So Nelson definitely going to play unless there's a unexpected something or other going on Friday or pregame warmups. You wouldn't expect that to be the case. And I'm calling Cobb doubtful at best right now.
We are all about audience participation, and in the chat room right now, Andrew Douglas says, what are Dr. Gene's thoughts on Graham and this weekend?
Not good. I don't think he's going to play. We've seen players of his ilk not practice at all and then do a little bit maybe on Friday and still be called a game time decision. It was called a banged knee after the game. It was a pretty clear high ankle sprain mechanism and a pretty significant one. And it's not surprising we saw it with Beckham. We've seen it with Reuben Foster, a ton of other players over the years. They come into the locker room after a high ankle sprain regardless of what they were able to do during the rest of the game on Sunday and not do well at all. The guys that have the best chance to play and play effectively are those that have some ability to get on the practice field by Wednesday or Thursday. If not, then the chances that there's swelling and stiffness and pain that's going to be limiting for a week or more are really high. Pete Carroll all but confirmed that Graham has had this injury before, and we've seen him battle through high ankle sprains before. I think we're probably going to get stuck in a game time decision this week or maybe even next week, depending on how the Friday practice participation goes. And we'll be talking about him more on Sunday, but he's on the doubtful side of questionable too.
I mean, Evan Engram was in concussion protocol. He just played Monday night. He's already practiced twice this week. Now, you know me overreacting. The last player I can remember being rushed, there I go. The last player I can remember practicing and playing this soon after concussion was Ladarius Green, where I think it was he came back the next week, got another concussion, and well, things never been the same. Obviously, I'm being Chicken Little here, but do you find anything odd about how this Evan Engram thing has progressed this week?
Not necessarily, because we don't really know what limited practice means. So there have been a small handful of players over the years, and I don't expect it to happen any longer, where there's an injury on Sunday and they play on Thursday Night Football. I don't expect many players to be cleared in 5 days anymore, but there are a lot of teams that have an independent neurologist available to them on Saturday so that they can stretch things out as we go. Giants play at home this weekend. They have 2 home games back to back. Or are they on the road?
Philly.
So, well, that's close enough where it may as well be home for them in terms of travel time and things like that. So the other part of this is we don't know what limited practice means. Doesn't mean he has a helmet on, has been cleared for contact. Could just mean that they're putting him out there, getting his heart rate up a little bit, letting him exercise a little bit more strenuously. Just watching this guy dance in the huddle there, and then clear him to play. So if he's got a full practice tomorrow or he does a little bit more, you'd like to see him do something that would make the Giants comfortable sending him to the independent neurologist either on Friday afternoon after practice or Saturday to get him cleared to play. And I always feel better about players that are getting in a limited practice by Thursday in the concussion protocol than those that aren't. And Engram is that category. There is a ton of players that are listed on the injury report with concussions that have not practiced so far this week, and Engram is not one of them. So of all the players that are listed, most of them are offensive linemen or linebackers. But I think Engram's got a good chance to play. The Giants really haven't updated his condition, but barring something unexpected tomorrow, it looks like he's got a good chance.
So, Gene, tell me a little bit about Rex Burkhead and whether you think he's going to play, or even if the fact that the New England Patriots have a depth chart filled with talents who are similar to him might influence their decision.
Yeah, I think that's probably where they are. The depth chart sets up really well for them. The wide receivers are getting a little healthier. Amendola has been back to practice. Hogan and Dorsett are limited, but Patriots limited means likely to play for the most part. I'm going to have Burkhead listed as likely inactive when I publish the Thursday practice review tonight. Rib injuries are difficult for running backs. You're absolutely right that they've got James White and Mike Gillislee that can approximate both ends of what Rex Burkhead is able to do. And then Dion Lewis has been healthy too. So if Rob Gronkowski is healthy enough to play, then I don't expect there's going to be any reason for them to put Burkhead back out there. And he's going to have to be at minimum limited practice tomorrow on Friday to have any chance to play.
Got about 5 more minutes with Dr. Jene Bramel here on the Audible Live. Dr. Jene, super quick, and then I have a regular question. But do you know the steps of the concussion protocol? Because last week when Ron Leary was in the concussion protocol and he was out there just watching practice, he wasn't doing anything, but he had a helmet on. Vance Joseph said after practice, like, oh, that's part of the protocol. Like, to put a helmet on and just watch. Do you know the steps of the protocol?
So the idea with the protocol is you'd like the players not to do much at all until their symptoms have resolved. So if they have a little bit of symptoms, you may, we've gotten away from saying, okay, you are going to spend your time in a quiet, dark situation and not stress your system at all. We've gotten away from that over the last 3 or 4 years. So the first part of the protocol will include just observation and moving around. The next steps are some light exercise where you get your heart rate up a little bit, but we're not doing any football related activity at that point. And if you clear those first 2 steps where you get through the rest phase, you get through a little bit of light exercise without any recurrence in symptoms at all, then you can start doing a little bit of football related activity. And some teams will accelerate things where they'll move through multiple stages in the same day, but generally it's a little bit more strenuous exercise, some sport related activity, and then return to pads. And then the last step is contact in the NFL, clearance by the independent neurologist to play. So there's about 5 steps there, but a lot of times 2 of those get combined into one day because they're close enough. If your headache is gone early in the day, maybe they'll let you do a little bit later. And not that headache is only a symptom necessarily, but allow you to do a little bit more in the afternoon because they can continue to observe you throughout the day in the training room. So it's generally a 4 to 5 step process, knowing that a couple of those sound pretty similar, right? Pretty strenuous exercise and then football related activity are pretty similar. But that's where they are. And then there's some cognitive testing. There's an impact test where you're checking balance, you're checking memory, you're checking cognitive functions in there as well. That's not part of the physical exercise protocol, but there are other steps involved with that too.
Jason wants to know, can Eifert be trusted this season?
No. Well, that's getting close too. You really do not like seeing players that are relatively fresh off of back surgery already having issues, and issues to the point where, we talked about this with Joe Flacco. Players with just a little bit of back spasms or a back contusion or something like that don't miss practice over a period of time. Aren't said on early Monday morning. You don't have Adam Schefter tweeting about you saying your status is already uncertain 6 days down the road. So it's hard to expect that you've got a 1 week rest period for Eifert and he's going to be fully practicing next Wednesday. He's not going to play this week. There's too much going on. There's too much fire where the smoke came from Adam Schefter. The Bengals rarely play players who aren't able to practice by Thursday and certainly into Friday. Best case scenario, the best way to feel good about Eifert moving forward is for him to be back to a limited practice tomorrow. But he's not even been seen on the rehab field yet. So this could be, I don't know what extended absence means for him necessarily. We've seen him miss a couple of weeks in past years and then come back and play before he's had the surgery in the offseason. But I would be very nervous about his injury history. The knee tendonitis isn't listed on the injury report, but it's an ongoing problem. The Bengals offensive line is terrible and not likely to get better. Limited practice on Friday, some indication that Bill Lazor can get this offense turned around against Green Bay this weekend, and maybe you feel better about Eifert, but there's too much going on right now to feel comfortable with him turning back into a 6 to 8 target per week player with upside.
Gene, is this the week that we get our champagne bottles out and we can send the SS Henry off to sea and to the great voyage and journey because DeMarco Murray's hamstring's been acting up?
Yeah, so do not pay any attention to what coaches and players say on Sunday and Monday if there's indications that a hamstring strain is aggravated. Those aggravations of hamstring strains are not just tweaks and cramps and very low-grade things that players are going to get back from. Corey Davis was already ruled out. And again, That was a 4 to 5 week injury in the beginning. There was no reason to expect him. Yeah, maybe you put him out there as a decoy in the red zone, knowing that he can't get up to top speed. He wasn't going to play this week. The fact that they ruled him out as early as they did means that he's very unlikely to play next week. Murray's in a little bit different situation. Murray missed practice, but he was doing some limited individual stuff. He didn't miss a ton of time in the preseason, so he probably had a lower grade. Not probably, he did have a lower grade injury than what Davis had. But it's an aggravated situation. It's an aggravated situation 3 days later or 3 weeks later, and it's unlikely that he's going to be able to go. I think there's a slim chance that they try to get him out in practice tomorrow to see how he feels going into the weekend. Mike Mularkey said that was the plan, but I think he's likely to be listed as a DNP and not practice. You've got Derrick Henry there, healthy and ready to go. Why put a limited DeMarco Murray out there and potentially end up with a situation where he can't return for a month, and then you risk having Derrick Henry as your only option, and if he gets hurt, what do you have left? So
David Llewellyn. For everybody out there, the name is David Llewellyn.
Right. So I don't expect Murray to play. If by some chance he's active, Henry is going to be the lead back in that committee, and I would expect Murray to be pretty limited. I don't think this is 2 days of rest like we've seen from a few other players where you expect them to play. I don't think this is nearly the same situation as what we're talking about with Ajayi. Won't be surprised to have Murray ruled out on Friday either.
Gene, we're going to let you choose your own adventure in the trenches here.
And there is a ton
of
offensive line things. And I can't even get them on one screen here.
So let me limit it a little bit for you at least, so we don't make it overwhelming. I've got two I'd like to know about. Either Mike Iupati and what a tricep really will help or hurt him do, or you can talk about anybody from the Bears line, and is there anything promising with that since they were down to their last reserve by halftime on Sunday?
So the good news in Chicago is that Kyle Long fully practiced, and John Fox was willing to say that he looks better and he's ready to play. Everything else with Chicago, I couldn't find any meaningful information today, and there was not a lot about Iupati. I think we're going to see Iupati back, but it was surprising to see him miss last week's game. That tells you that there's something more going on there, and those things tend to be longer than a 1 week injury. But he did return to practice today, at least in a limited fashion, and he's got until Monday to get ready. So over two full weeks of recovery after being listed with limited and then trying to play through it in week 1. I don't think Ryan Cleal is going to play. I think there's 3 names that we've got to watch pretty carefully. Ryan Schrader and his concussion in Atlanta. Cordy Glenn, his ankle and foot issues. It's the other foot now, and he has got an extremely difficult matchup this week. And I think that's going to affect LaShawn McCoy as well. So that's a tough ask for him to come back and play. It seems like he's going to play, but he looked terrible in the first half and then didn't even come out after halftime in week 2. And then lost my train of thought here. And Brian Bulaga and David Bakhtiari. Looks like Bulaga is going to come back. He was fully practiced again on Thursday, but Bakhtiari hasn't practiced yet either. And when you get an offensive lineman who goes a week or so without practicing, really any player with a hamstring strain, it takes a week or so for them to get back. And the fact that he's not practicing makes you think that it's going to be Murphy. And thankfully, Bulaga coming this week. Spriggs they put on injured reserve as what had turned into their swing tackle. So I'm watching Schrader in particular. There wasn't any information about Atlanta about whether or not where he was in the concussion protocol. Most of the information on all those guys, from Gerard Davis to Jamie Collins to Ryan Schrader to Marcus Cannon, all of those guys are we're going to try to get them to practice on Friday, and if they can't, they won't play. So tomorrow, as always, but especially this week, is huge for Friday practice participation and media interviews. And they're going to keep Adam Schefter and Ian Rappaport busy. If you thought last week's tweet storm was long, and there was probably about 35 tweets between Beckham and a few other players, this week is going to be crazy. They're going to have to get started at 2 a.m. instead of 4 just to get all their tweets in.
He's like a Twitter meteorologist. He is Dr. Jene Bramel, footballguys.com. Follow him on Twitter at Jene Bramel. And make sure to check out his work at footballguys.com. Dr. Gene,
thanks.
You're wonderful. Namaste.
Partly cloudy all day.
Hopefully not. See you, boys.
According to my sources, the tweet storm is set to happen. That's
or
that's
it's
my
like
Adam
a
Schefter
40-degree
impression.
day. Anyone know that reference?
No, what is it?
The Wire. It's like a
40-degree day, yeah. Nobody cares about a 40. This game hasn't been a 40-degree day.
No, it's been a pleasant 65, 70.
Carlos Hyde looked like a turtle on his back after that touchdown. Bloom, give us a game update.
Yeah, we just saw San Francisco go down the field. A couple of great catch by Pierre Garçon. Pierre Garçon still looking fired up. And again, Brian Hoyer saving his job. The CJ Beathard doomsday clock took a tick towards midnight to open the game, but now it's gone a few ticks backwards. Maybe we're like 11:55 right now as Hoyer is doing his job keeping them in this game. And this one has been fun to watch too. I think we talked about this with Goff, and we're seeing it more with Hoyer too. When offensive coaches can put quarterbacks in a comfort zone, give them a sense of predictability about plays at success level and play design, play sequencing. This is exactly what Cincinnati's missing, which is what's funny about this is, Sean McVay, the heir to that Jay Gruden line, and Jay Gruden, part of what allowed Andy Dalton to be set up for success. And these two quarterbacks, both feel comfortable, confident in the plays that are being called, which is really the opposite of what we saw from the Rams last year. So again, if you haven't seen the Rams offense yet this year, and the last time you saw them was last year, it's like that friend that you saw that was doing really rough. You're almost to the point where you're going to have the intervention, and then next you're like, well, you lost some weight. It looks like you're feeling a lot better about yourself, holding down a job. Look forward to this.
Looking forward to talking fantasy football for the next 30 minutes or so with the fellas. And Matt, I'm going to start with you. Jordan McNamara brings this up in the chat room, and I love the idea of this topic. Matthew Stafford looking really good, and how can that be maintained over the course of the season from a fantasy lens? We can talk about this week specifically, Matt. Is it a little more from Marvin Jones, more from Kenny Golladay, who had the great week 1 and then nothing week 2? What kind of offense will we see the Lions maintain, and can they sustain, and can Stafford specifically maintain this level of play and this level of success for the Lions?
Yeah, he can, because when everyone was downing Matthew Stafford over the past few years, when they said, oh, all he does is go to Calvin Johnson. Well, when you have guys drop balls left and right, when you make MVP caliber throws late in games, and no, I wasn't saying he's an MVP caliber candidate at those times, but he made a lot of throws that people are praising him for now, but they were dropped back then. So how much are you going to trust other guys in those situations? So sometimes people just don't really look at context deep enough, and I understand that. But when you look at Stafford, as long as his receivers can catch the football, and I'm talking about all of them, he's going to spread the ball around enough, just like Matt Ryan spreads the ball around. And I think that you're seeing that from Stafford, who has greater trust in an elevated receiving core overall. Calvin Johnson, you could say Calvin Johnson's better than all those receivers combined. Well, yes, but there aren't 5 Calvin Johnsons out on the field. And if you put 3 guys to cover him, one of the other 4 have to still be able to catch the football, or else you're done. And that's what was happening in Detroit for a long time. So if the offensive line continues to play better, the defense doesn't, the defense continues to play decent football, then I think that if Marvin Jones gets double covered like he did on Monday night, and he gets plastered by a top end cornerback like Patrick Peterson, then they'll be able to go to Tate all day long. They'll be able to go to Golladay matched up against the worst defensive back on the team. And Eric Ebron may actually help out a little bit. It doesn't bode well for fantasy owners in terms of predictability just yet. I think that we need another couple of games to see who's the zone target, who's the man target overall with certain looks. But I think that there's enough offensive diversity with the skill players that Matthew Stafford is going to keep up the pace and play good football for fantasy owners year long.
It is a Broncos show, so Bloom, I'm going to throw this one at you. Sean McDermott didn't take C.J. Anderson seriously in Super Bowl 50. And I always laughed when Carolina reporters like, when did he say that? Well, he didn't say it publicly, idiot. He said it privately to players before Super Bowl 50 in the preparation, like, we don't have to worry about this Anderson guy. You think he's going to take him seriously now? And what do fantasy owners do? Everyone's asking me, but it's my bowling partner, so I'm never trade C.J. Anderson for an actual angel from heaven. I'd say, I'll stick with C.J. He's he could bowl 300. Selling high on Anderson with this Booker news, Booker being back. Also, no that a majority of what CJ is doing is in the first half. My idea is that Booker will be used as a closer to cut into what Charles does more than CJ, especially early. Now, we'll see how that plays out. Anything could happen, and hell, Jonathan Williams is probably going to be the team starter next year anyway. Yeah. But CJ Anderson selling high against the Bills. Bills in that front seven are going to be very active, very complicated. Now, Garrett Bowles looks like he's going to play. Homeboy was out there today practicing and actually looking good. So let's talk about this, and if McDermott will take him seriously, and what do fantasy owners do before, you know, it's something with CJ, something that hopefully he plays through and gets through, but it hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why he was a sell high this week and buy low, sell high, just because we've had enough moments in CJ Anderson's career, like the one we're at right now, where he looks like one of the best running backs in the league, a great all-around back, capable of handling a large workload, capable of being very productive in this Denver offense, and never has he put a whole season together. It just seems like, why should we trust him to do that when we've had a large sample size of seasons now to see if he can, and he's been given every opportunity to do that. As you said, you have Devontae Booker. Jamal Charles is showing that he can contribute to this team. We'll see what happens to D'Angelo Henderson, but the team also liked him. Like you said, they like Jonathan Williams. Maybe that's part of what pushes CJ Anderson to stay there, stay at that place. But if you can recoup something like running back one value for him right now, you probably drafted him in the 5th or 6th round. Maybe if you hit on 2 running back picks before CJ Anderson and you don't need him, or maybe you picked up a Tarek Cohen in a PPR league or something like that, so you don't need him, then I do think it's time to cash him out where he's at now. That being said, if you can't, or if you don't want to, this week against the Bills, you know Denver's going to control the game. You know he's going to get his 20-plus touches. You know that the defense alone probably will set them up for 1 or 2 scoring drives. Trevor Siemian, the way he's playing. I think we're going to learn about Buffalo's defense. Is it just the Jets and Cam Newton being rusty, or is Buffalo's defense better than we expected with Sean McDermott? But Denver's had some success. So you play CJ Anderson this week, but if you can trade him at his current value, which would be about a 2nd, maybe early 3rd round pick, if I could take CJ Anderson and straight up turn him into, say, maybe even part of a package to jump up to a Le'Veon Bell or a Devontae Freeman or someone like that.
What about Zeke, Bloom? I've seen a lot of, hey, somebody offered me Zeke for CJ. And with this legal thing, listen, I'm no lawyer, so I might as well go to somebody who is, Bloom.
Yeah, well, the Fifth Circuit is notoriously conservative and pro-business. The question is, when will they rule on it? Now, we already saw something from, there's great, and the funny thing is, like, there's 2 or 3 or 4 sports legal analysts now. I think it was Daniel Wallach who said that Goodell had already said that if the opinion came down and the overturned the injunction. So basically what happened is, the East Texas judge agreed with Ezekiel Elliott and the NFLPA that some grave harm could be done to him if they enforce this suspension without hearing his case in federal court first. However, the circuit could come in and say, no, he made the wrong decision and overturn him. It's a high bar, but they are pro-business, and the NFL's on the business side of this. And it could make this suspension start to toll either right away this week. Goodell had not decided whether, let's say if the decision came down tomorrow, whether he'd even play this weekend, or maybe it would be next week. But they're thinking about that. So I'm just getting a bad vibe from Zeke and how he played last week, to be honest. I'm not sure. I just know that it feels like in the fantasy community, people have discounted greatly the possibility of Zeke having to serve that suspension this year, and it's still very much in play. It may still only be 10, 20, 30%. I do think one thing that's not going to happen is this decision being put off for months or weeks even. I think we're going to see it one way or the other, and then we'll have clarity on him going forward. I like gambling, but trading CJ Anderson for Zeke right now, again, if it's a situation where I don't need Anderson, then I would probably do that. If it's a situation where I have to count on Zeke through the midseason, I might be hesitant.
The Broncos were like Jerry Reed in Waterboy when they walked in for the green playbook and like, things are going to get awfully physical. And Zeke was just, here's the green playbook. Where's your heart, son? Matt is Jared Goff, who we're watching tonight in this game, part of the streaming conversation. The chat room wants to know when they are reacting to us. And, let's expand on the differences in Goff. And is it more than just, Andrew Whitworth and the weapons, like the difference in his game and the comfort level they're in, and does that make him part of the streaming conversation?
It does make him a part of the streaming conversation, because when you look at last year, again, I make the analogy of learning a new language. And we've talked about this before. Jared Goff was learning a new language. He's learning the most difficult NFL offensive language in football, or the most difficult offensive language in football, which is the West Coast offense. And it's the equivalent of learning Chinese and then having to go out into a Hong Kong busy thoroughfare while you have your bladders acting up and having to ask for where the restroom is, and someone giving you convoluted convoluted, directions. In English, you would probably not remember some of those directions if they were the equivalent of the West Coast offensive play calls. And on top of it, they weren't extremely schemed well, considering that it was Jeff Fisher's staff that was doing it, and it was compared to a high school offense. So when you put all that in play, I think there are way too many high expectations for Goff. And you got to understand that you may have, your quarterbacking personality. What you see at his best in the college game was that he stood well in the pocket. He didn't have happy feet. He baited defenders to come to him, and he would sidestep them, throw the ball with very good accuracy down the field. That's him at his best. Well, when you're trying to learn the language and think about basic things, you're not going to play the way that your personality plays out to be. Now you look at what's going on, because he has more time in the pocket, because he has an offense that makes sense, because the concept of the play calling in the West Coast offense actually makes sense to him now. You have a player who's starting those aspects of his personality are starting to come out, that comfort level. Even tonight, you're seeing that when he drops back and he sets his feet, the ball comes out. That he's looking off defenders. He's looking off. Sometimes he's going back to the receiver after he looks to a new one and sets up the deeper throw. He's been deep. He's been accurate deep. He's also shown the ability that to stand in there and take hits. And I think that you look at that all around. And while I'm not talking about him as a next All-Pro, you're seeing a guy who looks like an NFL quarterback. And you can say the credit goes to Sean McVay. You can say the credit goes to the offensive line, and it does. Those things definitely get credit. But the credit also goes to the absence of those two things for why Goff looked so bad as he did. But you also have to give Goff credit for the fact that he's willing to that he actually developed in the way that he had. So when you look at bad defenses as a matchup, he's going to be a good streamer play for you because of the diversity of weapons that they have, the way he spreads it around, and the fact that he's aggressive going deep. And you saw instances of that last year. If they didn't have receivers that A, dropped the ball, or B, didn't want to work with them because they didn't want to work at all. Because, Kenny Britt, I'm already hearing a lot of our writers at Footballguys going, Kenny Britt just doesn't want to be bothered. Kenny Britt doesn't even want to be bothered. Well, I didn't want to be bothered with watching tape with Jared Goff last year either. So that's what we've been talking about since last year, and it's coming to fruition.
Gary Martinson in the chat room says, Ni hao, donde está el baño? Footballguys trivia for you. If you can hit me on Twitter at Cecil Lammey, what Footballguys.com staffer worked on the Nickelodeon show Ni Hao Kai Lan? You two may not even know. Anyway, we will leave that for you to discover. And just hit me up on Twitter at Cecil Lammey. I'll send you something. Anyway, Bloom.
Yes.
Did Tavon Austin actually do something?
He did on the jet sweep. I don't know if he scored. That being said, it's all working when Tavon Austin can get down to the goal line. And it's just fun to watch how all this is all being put together. I'm warming up my pipes because if this is short, we may go back to the hurdy-gurdy man. We might get that 4-bagger yet.
Austin will be gone next year, man. He'll be gone. I think that the cap's favorable, and if you muff a punt and that's the only thing you do well,
right,
scary.
Yeah, he gone. We'll see some movement, maybe to Seattle. Seattle's in the chat room now, so Matt, I'm going to throw this to you because of your Seattle ties. We don't have to go to Jimmy Graham and the injury there, all that, but everybody else, other than Chris Carson, right? Doug Baldwin owners are worried. Paul Richardson owners, I guess, want more. Tyler Lockett owners could see more, certainly, especially without Graham. That seems to be, the back and forth there. And then Russell Wilson. So let's discuss Russell Wilson and these struggles and that offensive line, which is so bad that Donald Stevenson watches him play and is like, man, you guys suck.
Yeah. And that's the lesson that if you have to know yourself as a fantasy owner. And if you're a conservative fantasy owner who basically is waiting for other fantasy owners to make decisions that screw up, basically, and you win by letting others screw up and just making prudent course type of thing, kind of the guy who lays up on the golf course, I guess. If you're kind of that layup guy and everybody else screw up, then you don't pick players on teams with bad offensive lines. You learn everything you can from that offensive line situation. And if it looks like it may smell bad, then it probably is going to taste bad. So you just stay away from it. And that's what's going on with Seattle right now. When you have a running back by committee, when you have a back who you had a weight incentive clause with, and you have another one coming back from an injury, and, they all may be talented, but none of them really have the support to be able to do anything with it because they can't find a crease. And then you have a great quarterback in terms of throwing the deep ball, but he has to buy time to do it. That's not a good look either. So to me, the hope is that you wait another 3 to 4 weeks, and you may, if you picked a lot of Seattle players, you have to hope that the offensive line gets better. And that's really your greatest hope. If Tom Cable figures it out, in terms of what combinations and helping these players figure out what they need to do to accelerate their learning curve, then great. But it's a lot of pressure to put on an offensive line coach. And while they did it once in the past 2 years, I think it's going to be 1 out of 3 this year. And I would just tell folks that you're going to have to move on and just swallow the medicine, and it's going to taste bad, and figure out what you're going to have to do to rehab your team as fast as possible.
Well, and that's part of the strategy. I mean, in the limited season, no offense, Bloom, but this isn't baseball.
Yeah.
Like, you got this limited amount of time, and if you sit there going, and now it'll happen, and now it'll happen. It reminds me of the Brandon Cooks conversation. Like, and now is the week, and now is the time, and you can't keep waiting and keep having better plays on your bench, Bloom.
No, and it happened so fast. I mean, as it is, we're 2 weeks into the season, and it feels like so much has happened already.
Right.
In the fantasy football season, 2 weeks is about 15% of the season. So that's why we have a sense of urgency about these moves, and why we have a sense, not so much of finality, but having to act with some sort of certainty, even though we never have all of the information. So you're right. The season moves so fast. Things, Rashard Higgins, practice squad 1 week, #1 receiver in the offense. The next week, that's how
the next day, Bloom. He got
the next day
on Saturday, and on Sunday he had almost 100 yards.
And I appreciate, Matt Waldman, that you're telling all of us Cason Williams later. It's still coming, because I had Cason Williams on all of my dynasty rosters, and then I see he was a healthy scratch for Rashard Higgins. I should have followed the ball. I didn't, but Rashard Higgins going for like 50% of waiver wire budgets in a lot of leagues that I saw this week. So
we know that Sammy Coates is not going to do anything.
No, we know it's not Sammy Coates.
And that's why I think they made a healthy scratch out of Cason Williams, is because Sammy Coates showed just enough that they said, well, let's try out the super athletic guy, because we love athletes. We've got a really good route runner who can catch the ball, but we love athletes. Let's give the guy who was the sloppy seconds from the Steelers a chance.
Yeah, I'm giving up on Sammy Coates. Yeah.
You can't catch. Bloom or the Saints, it's like a circus seal. And now I got a
circus seal Sammy Coates.
Circus seal Sammy Coates.
Throw him a fish. Maybe he'll catch that.
Right. Bark. Bloom or the Saints going to figure it out. And what's it look like when Willie Snead returns?
Not this week. They're not going to figure it out this week. Not against Carolina. Carolina's defense is too tough right now with the linebackers they have, with the defensive tackles they have. Everything else new again, right? Charles Johnson and Julius Peppers. We can get D'Angelo Williams back in a Panthers uniform too. So no, not this week. I actually have Drew Brees well outside of my top 10 quarterbacks. I think we already know his track record outdoors. We know that Michael Thomas may one day be a true number one receiver, a la AJ Green, Julio Jones, have that great gravitational pull that opens things up. He's not there yet. And then you're counting on Kobe Fleener, Ted Ginn. These guys aren't consistent enough. They aren't excellent enough players. Even when Willie Snead, sorry to Willie Snead, because his story's been an outstanding story. And yet another one that Cleveland Browns let get away. They didn't let Rashard Higgins get away, at least.
Not yet.
Does the sentence, can Willie Snead save the offense or be a shot in the arm? I mean, I love Willie Snead, but no, he's not going to tactically change the picture for this offense. And for fantasy, maybe the saving grace might be that the defense is so bad that they have to play out of these holes, and Drew Brees can get numbers in garbage time. And I guess this is a good time to point out that the Atlanta Falcons play the New Orleans Saints in week 14 and week 16. So try to get Matt Ryan before people that own Ryan figure that out.
That's 2 thumbs up for you there. Matt, I want you to take it easy on our man Brandon Conti in the chat room. Well, maybe you'll look at this differently, but he says, I traded Derrick Henry for AJ Green. You guys like that? You like that? What's your Kirk Cousins answer for Brandon? He traded Derrick Henry for AJ Green. You like that, Matt Waldman?
Is it a dynasty league or a redraft league?
I didn't say, but probably. Let's just assume
redraft.
Yeah.
In a redraft league, I would say it's a ballsy move. And you look at it from the standpoint that you're hoping that Derrick Henry takes his job and runs with it and closes the door on the career for DeMarco Murray as a starter. And if that happens, then you're looking at a double-digit touchdown guy, and it's the kind of ballsy move that you kind of have to make to win leagues sometimes when it comes to aggressively getting a good running back. Because are you really if your choices are Buck Allen, Alex Collins, Tariq Cohen, or I've got enough depth at wide receiver that I can trade a stud who's on a team that doesn't have an offensive line to protect the guy throwing me the ball for a guy who's in a great situation. That's the kind of move you want to make. So it looks rough on the surface, but I would say that it's the kind of move that ultimately wins championships, especially if you have depth in your receiving core that may not be name brand, but you can dangle the guy who's like, this is a premium vehicle right here. This is an unbelievable vehicle. Now you don't want to know that the Carfax report had a driver who, basically liked to shoot off his BB gun in the car while he was driving around. And that's what's going on in Cincinnati right now.
It is the Audible Live. You guys make it all so much fun. And back to the chat room, as the chat room is fired up. And our guys, like even our man Jason Bloom, he's listened to our show for 3 years. This is the first time he's live. Like if you listen to this on iTunes, first off, thank you. And if you've listened for 3 years or more, or all 11 years that we've been doing the show, thank you guys very much. But jump in on this chat room. Jump in on the live show and make us part of your 2-screen experience. The chat room is now wondering, Bloom, if Jeff Fisher is throwing his remote at the TV tonight. And I said, Jeff Fisher still stands up to change the channels.
Well, no, but there was that picture from it was kind of sad, but and I'll put the link up in the chat room. Because believe it or not, folks, there was actually a last Sunday, or I'm sorry, 2 Sundays ago, on the first Sunday of the league of the season, a Jeff Fisher sighting. Hold on, I'll put it in the chat room for y'all. It was at Bozeman, Montana, at a co-op, and Jeff Fisher was in line. And on one hand, you look at the picture of Fisher, he actually looks like, I don't know what he's got on. He's got maybe his sunglasses hanging around his neck. He looks super casual. He looks like relaxed. So you feel good for him. But on the other hand, knowing that it's football season and knowing that he's been so central in the NFL for so long, that he's at a co-op in Bozeman, Montana during the NFL season, you kind of feel sad for him. And I do think something we talked about, to bring this back topically to what we're watching right now, is Brian Hoyer's dealing and making the San Francisco driving down the field yet again. I think we really are seeing with the Rams that ding dong, the witch is dead, bounce for this team. That Jeff Fisher not only and his staff were not only an obstacle towards this team realizing their potential or the talent being put in situations to succeed, but they were actually demoralizing. And speaking of Cincinnati, we wonder if this is where Cincinnati is going to get to this year, Marvin Lewis, etc., where the team had lost confidence in him and the team had lost confidence in their coaches. And what we saw last year was really a team going through the motions. It's kind of like watching Randy Moss that year in Oakland. And now, especially seeing Todd Gurley, I haven't had a chance to sing again. I wanted to sing it live, but we missed out. He could have 5 touchdowns tonight. Instead, we got Sammy Watkins, the first Goff to Watkins touchdown, maybe first of many the way this game's going. But I do think that we should always remember that coaches can not only be lacking positives, but can be a negative for a team.
Austin William chimes in. He says, been listening for 3 years. Travis Kelce and OBJ were the first great calls you guys made for me. First time listening live. Cool to listen in live with all of you. Again, thank you guys. No matter how you listen or you watch this show, they also want to play What's on Sigmund's Shelf.
Oh, yeah. Hold on.
I think I see a picture of me.
You do see a picture of me. A signed picture of you.
That's an autographed picture of me.
I must. It's just the nature of the odds at the Secret Santa that I have the poster, but I just have the little one up there now, and there's the piñata. I can't wait to hit that, and we can interpret that however we want.
Oh yes, it can be interpreted all sorts of ways. Then we're next going to play What's in Matt's Room.
Yeah. That's the extended Audible.
Yes, it would be very much so. You could get lost in here.
Yeah, you could get lost in the stacks of DVDs from college football games.
Yeah, I have those hidden right now. So that's I'm sitting on those actually.
It's like the Iron Throne, except instead of being swords, it's like college football DVDs.
Yeah, pretty much, man. It's great. I'm from like 2001 to 2006. I've got a nice easy chair right here in an ottoman.
And oh my God, transferring here, I'm gonna bitch for a second. Transferring your old VHS tapes or DVDs to hard drives, you have to do it in real time, or at least the software that I use, you have to do it in real time. Anyway, Bloom, you never hurt my feelings more than when you're like, "That's it." When you saw my collection of VHS football games.
Yeah, but I didn't say that when I saw your collection of jerseys. So we balance it out.
Very good. Very good. It is the Audible Live. That is a wrap for tonight's program. Matt Waldman, final thoughts.
Wow, 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 yippee-yo, yippee-yay. Wow, wow, yippee-yo, yippee-yay, yippee-yay.
Bloom, I don't think you can top that unless you start doing some KRS-One.
Take the pillow from your head and put a book in it.
We're getting loopy. I swear nothing was in that orange juice. I swear to you all. So for the great Matt Waldman and the fantastic Sigmund Bloom, and of course the one and only Dr. Jene Bramel, I am Cecil Lammey saying thank you guys. Stay tuned and stay frosty.